Hi, it's Sherri from A Quilting Life, and I'm here today with the first block in my 2021 block of the month. I'm super excited about this year's block of the month. I'm going to do a few things a little bit differently. I am going to do a step-by-step video and walk you through the entire construction process of the block each month. So if you're a new or beginner quilter, or even if you're an intermediate quilter and want to learn tips for this block, you can watch the video every month and see step-by-step how to put it together, how I've pressed the seams, and all the tools that I used while sewing the block. I hope you'll enjoy this month's block. It's really a fun one. And let's get started. Okay, let's get started making the January block. You will be able to download the free PDF, and it's a 2-page step-by-step picture with all of the information that you'll need to know. And you'll notice that the blocks can be made in a 6-inch finished, 6.5 unfinished, or 12-inch finished, 12.5-inch unfinished. So I'm going to demonstrate with the 12-inch block today and show you step-by-step how we're going to make this block. Now, I did make some kits available earlier. I'm not sure if there are any still available. You can check on my Etsy shop and see if there are any more available. But if not, I'm going to show you, just kind of tell you everything that I'm using so you can find that same fabric if you want to make it the same that we are making it with the kits. So I'm using a mini charm pack for the little scrappy parts of the block, and that is just kind of just to make it a little bit easier. You don't have to have a mini charm pack to make this block. You can just pull your scraps for the small scrappy rectangles, but I decided to use a mini charm pack just to make it easier to cut. And then you will need a background fabric, and I'm using the Moda Bella 9900-200. It seems to go really well with the Happy Days collection that I'm using for this quilt. I'm also using a Happy Days low volume print floral for my center of my block. And for my half square triangles in the corners, I'm using the citrine print from Happy Days. So I've chosen these fabrics, and these are the fabrics that you'll get in your kit, or very similar. Some of the kits will have a different center fabric and a different half square triangle fabric, just so that I don't run out of fabric before the fabric actually ships in March, and I can finish up the rest of the kits with what I have on order. So some of the kits will be slightly different for the first couple of blocks until the fabric actually arrives. So, okay, let's get started. So the first thing that you're going to need is 2 squares that are 4 inches by 4 inches for your half square triangles from the background fabric. And so I've shared this before, but when I'm cutting smaller pieces of fabric, I really feel like it's easier to use a smaller ruler. So I'm going to even up my edges and then cut 2 4-inch squares. Okay, I'm going to cut those. Now this fabric right here also needs to be cut into 2 4-inch squares, so I'm going to trim it down. We're actually going to make half square triangles for this block, just a traditional way that I like to use. We don't need enough to really justify using triangle paper. On the other hand, if you happen to have some extra half square triangles left over from another project with triangle paper, by all means go ahead and use those. Okay, this center square is going to get trimmed to 6.5 by 6.5. I can't remember if I did that already. Looks like I did. I already trimmed it to 6.5 by 6.5. Okay, and then from your remaining background fabric, we need 4 rectangles that are 2 inches by 6.5. And I'm going to grab just another piece of fabric. And cut those remaining 2 rectangles. Okay, so we've got the 4 rectangles, 2 by 6.5. All the measurements I'm giving you are for the 12-inch finished block. So 4 of those, 2 print rectangles, 4 inches by 4 inches, 2 background rectangles, 4 inches by 4 inches, and 1 6.5 inch by 6.5 inch center square. And now we're going to trim down these mini charm packs. And what you're going to need are 24 of these squares. And you can just choose your favorite 24. You can mix lights and darks. You don't need to use all of the dark ones. You can put in some of your favorite print squares. I'm not going to use the plain one, and I'm not going to use the one that matches my center square because it will go up next to that. So other than that, I feel like it's pretty much anything goes. I'm going to choose 4 different lights, 1 for each side of the square. And then I'm going to choose, I'm not going to repeat any prints. So I'm just going to just quickly select these. See, some of them I might leave out because I am only going to need 24. So okay, the other thing I'm going to do is just kind of make sure that I have a pretty good mix of colors, which I think I do. I have only 2 navies, so I'm going to make sure that they're separated in the block. And I have 4 reds, so there'll be 1 red on each side of the square and 4 lights on each side of the square. Okay, so the next thing that you're going to do is you're going to trim these to measure 1.5 inches by 2 inches. So I like to stack them up 4 at a time. And since I separated them into these little piles, I'm just going to keep them in those piles. And then I'll know that those will all go on one side. And I don't like to cut more than 4 at a time, so I'm going to put 4 and 2. And they need to be 1.5 inches by 2 inches. So I'm going to cut 1.5 inch first. And then, actually, I think I'm just going to cut them into 1.5 inch strips first. And I'll show you why. I just thought of an easier way that we can put these together. So I'm just going to cut them into 1.5 inch rectangles for now. Okay, one thing I did notice while I was trimming these was that I had two of the arrow prints in this kind of group of fabric. So I'm going to trade out my red arrow for a red print just to kind of even out my block. You don't have to do that, but I might as well do it while I'm putting them in these piles. Okay, so the pattern directions for the 12-inch block are going to tell you to cut these into 1.5 inches by 2 inches, but we left them at 1.5 inches by 2.5. The mini charm squares are 2.5 by 2.5. And that is because we will be able to trim them up and make them more accurate by cutting them this way. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is make our half square triangles. And when I'm just making a few, the method I like to use is a 1/2 inch wide ruler and my favorite sew line pencil. And I'm just going to line this up on the diagonal and draw 2 lines. So my lines are exactly 1/2 inch apart. Okay, then I'm going to put this fabric right sides together with the prints. I'm going to take them over to the sewing machine and I'm going to sew on each of these lines just inside the line in towards the middle of the block. You don't want to go out into this area or your half square triangle might be too small. So I'm going to head over there. I'm going to sew those. But what I'm also going to do is sew a group of these, and I'm going to just kind of put them together. Oh, see, I had 2 reds, the stripes there, so I'm going to switch that for another pile. Okay, so I'm also going to go and I'm going to sew this strip together with a 1.5 inch seam along these 2.5 inch edges. And this is something I usually do if I'm over here and I need to take something over the machine. I'll just stack it up on my ruler to carry it over there. So I'm going to go sew that, and I'm going to go sew the seams for the half square triangle and be right back. Okay, I'm back from the sewing machine. I'm going to show you I sewed just right inside those 2 lines that I had drawn. What I do next is I cut this in half, and so what that has given me is 2 half square triangles. But these are a little bit big, and so I like to make them just a touch big so that I can trim them to the perfect size. I love using this fit to be quarter ruler where it has diagonal lines that I can line up with my seam and trim my block before I've even pressed it. So I've got the 3.5 inch line on my seam, and I only have to cut on 2 sides that way because it's, and then I'll have a perfect 3.5 inch half square triangle. And I know some of you might have other methods that you like, other rulers that you like, and go ahead and use those. Everybody finds what works best for them, but when I'm making just a few, I just really like this method. So, and then it doesn't matter which way you press the seam on these. You can press it to the dark or you can press it open. I actually pressed the other 2 while I was over at the sewing machine and iron. And I did press them open just because I feel like it gives you less bulk. So we will take these over and press them open. Before I do that, I'm going to show you what I did with my rectangles. I sewed them all together and I did press them in one direction. And now I'm going to show you why we didn't trim them down, because sometimes when you sew small pieces together, they get slightly kind of off kilter. So we want these to be exactly 2 inches wide. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to even up this one side. And then I'm going to cut it to exactly 2 inches. So see, if we had already cut these rectangles at that 2 inch width, we wouldn't be able to trim it this accurately. So I really, really do like doing that. So then you're going to have this rectangle, and it will match up with one side of our center square. And then I'm going to show you I actually do, even though it's scrappy, I do kind of like to have a method to my madness. So I'm kind of just going to put these around kind of in the order that I want them. Just kind of a rough estimate, and I kind of try to make sure that nothing lines up exactly with the colors across. Okay, so I'm going to take these over to the sewing machine. I'm going to sew them just like I showed these. I will go ahead and press them and trim them down, and I'm also going to press my other half square triangles, and then I'll be able to show you how to put this block all together. Okay, I'm back from the sewing machine and from the iron, and I'm just going to trim these remaining strip sets. And again, I'm making the 12-inch block, and so these will be 2 inches. Okay, so next thing I'm going to do is I really like to trim these little dog ears off of my half square triangles. There's just no need to keep them there. They'll just add bulk into your block. And so I actually usually, you could trim them with your rotary cutter, but I usually just snip them off with some scissors. And I did notice, and you'll probably notice it too, I actually didn't think about this when I was laying these out. I have these two fabrics kind of right next to each other, and they're the same color. So I actually think I'm going to unpick this seam right here and flip those fabrics so that I don't have the same color right next to each other. You don't have to do that. It's kind of my controlled scrappy thing. But as I do that also, what we're going to do with these strips that we cut is we're going to sew them to each of our strip sets. So we're going to take them to the sewing machine, and you're going to place them right sides together and sew with a 1/4 inch seam, and we're going to make 4 of those. And we'll take them over. I'm going to unpick and do my little flip here, and then I'll sew this one too, and be right back, and we'll be ready to put the block together. Okay, so I've got those sewn. I did press to the light. I know that's, you generally are told not to, but it just was going to make these lay so much more flat. So I did press all those seams to the light, and it doesn't matter with the half square triangles. There's nothing over here to affect that. Now, what I do next is I take all of my block pieces and I put them on a block board to take over to the sewing machine. You can make these yourself. I can link to a tutorial from Lori Holt that she shared several years ago, but you can also buy them from Fat Quarter Shop. They have them pre-made. And I love them. I've made several in all different sizes, so for smaller blocks or larger blocks, but I like because the batting keeps the fabrics from shifting, and I can just take this over to my sewing machine and nothing is going to move. So I'm going to go over there. I'm going to sew the top row together, so these 3 pieces, and then I'm going to sew the center together, and the same thing with the bottom row. And for the direction that we're going to press the seams, I am going to press these two seams in and these out and these out. So you're always going to be pressing away from your strip piece rectangle set. That's an easy way to remember it. So you'll press these out, out, and press these in. And that way the seams will nest when we come back. Okay, so I'm back from the sewing machine, and I just want to show you, I did press these seams in, and then I press these seams out, and these seams are also out. So I'm just going to show you in case you are a beginner and have wondered, what does the term nested seams mean? I thought this would be a good place to show you that. So since this seam is going that direction and this seam is going that direction, we can put those right up next to each other. And I always put a pin. I'm not a great pinner, but when I'm sewing something together and I want it to match, I will use a pin. So we're going to pin right there where those two seams meet, and then I'll just stick a pin in the middle as well, and one on each end. So that is what is meant by nested seams. And then we can do the same thing with the other side. They're also going to nest or kind of butt up right next to each other. And one in the middle and one on each end. And then I will take that to the sewing machine and press it and come back to show you. Our block will be done. Okay, back from the sewing machine and the iron. We have our finished block. I really love how this one turned out. I feel like it's a good scrappy mix, but there's also open space around the edges. I wanted to show you that I pressed these final row seams in, and that just seemed to really help because most of the rectangular pieces are being allowed to lay flat. So that makes the block overall more flat. So just a really fun block. I hope you'll enjoy making it. I'm going to be making the 6-inch size too. I think what I'm going to do this year with my 6-inch blocks is I am going to make them in Christmas fabrics so that I will have a fun little Christmas table topper or wall hanging at the end of the year. I hope you enjoyed making this month's block and having this step-by-step. That is new for this year, and we will be doing that every single month, a step-by-step block tutorial. Remember, you'll need to go to the blog to download the free PDF pattern for this month's block, and it will give you the information for this 12-inch finish size and for the 6-inch finish size. And additionally, I've got links to all the little products and notions that I used today in the description below. Happy quilting, and thanks so much for stopping by.